In this video, learn how to interpret two-card relationship readings, so stay tuned. Hi everyone, it's Ray with Tarot Living. Thanks so much for joining. So on my channel, we talk about all things spiritual. So if you're interested in tarot, astrology, psychic development, you'll want to subscribe and make sure to hit the bell notification to be sure you get an email when I do post a video. And to learn how to read tarot cards, join me on Facebook for weekly tarot exercises and activities under my private group, Tarot Living Study Group. The link is in the description below. Thank you for joining. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to interpret various two-card relationship reading combinations. Two-card readings are sometimes underestimated. They can provide very clear answers to a variety of questions. The key is really knowing what to look for in the readings. In my last video on two-card readings, I reviewed in detail the 5 steps you should focus on when interpreting a two-card reading. Therefore, I'll only briefly review the steps in this video. So here they are. So the first step relates to card positions of the reading and what questions to ask. In all of my two-card readings, the card positions are essentially the same. Card number 1 represents the situation or details surrounding the situation. Card number 2 represents the potential outcome, result, or impact on card number 1. In terms of good questions to ask, try and create a fairly focused question rather than an all-encompassing life question. For example, what barrier or challenge am I currently facing in my relationship? Rather than, what does my love life look like over the next 12 months? So you can see it's a much more focused question. The second step is to look at the elements and suits that you see in the reading. As many of you know, the 4 natural elements relate to the 4 suits in the tarot deck. So fire relates to wands, earth to pentacles, air to swords, and water relates to cups. So the elements will tell you what realm of life or what circumstances are likely to be important in the reading. So if the 2 cards are the same element, that really strengthens the importance of that element. Third step, check the numbers on the cards to see if they're the same number, which would amplify the meaning of that number. If they're not the same number, you would still review the meaning of each number from 1 to 10, because that can be very useful for interpreting a reading. Step number 4, check card meanings. Always look for a pattern in the card meanings. Many cards overlap or have similar meanings, which can create a theme within the reading. And step 5, identify any common interactions between the cards. There's often a flow of energy or interaction between the cards that are frequently seen from reading to reading. So these interactions can help you identify exactly what might be going on for the querent, such as one card shows upheaval and strife, and the second card shows harmony and positivity. So that can be really helpful for interpreting a reading. To learn more details about these steps, feel free to check out my prior video on 2-card readings. The link is in the description below. So let's get started interpreting 2 relationship readings in this video. They're both romantic relationship questions, but you could certainly ask about other types of relationships, such as friendships or family dynamics. Okay, here's the question for the first reading. What aspect of my relationship do I need to focus on in order to improve the connection with my partner? So the cards pulled are the 4 of Cups in the first position, which shows the situation or details of the situation. The second position is the Wheel of Fortune, which shows the potential outcome, result, or how it impacts card number 1. So first I would look at the elements within the cards. So in this reading, we see the water element with the 4 of Cups and the fire element with the Wheel of Fortune. So you might recall the elements of water and fire together are quite unfriendly as an elemental combination. So that creates some tension or some challenges within the reading, which we'll discuss shortly. However, that's very good to know, and I'll keep that in mind as I proceed, that these elements don't really coordinate very well or work extremely well or easily together. Okay, so the next step, I look at the numbers on the cards. So the numbers are 4 and 10, which of course are not the same number. However, I would review the meaning of each of the numbers to determine how it will impact the interpretation of the reading. So the number 4 often suggests stability, security, solid foundation, and also stubbornness or stagnation, especially when it comes to cups or pentacle suit. And the number 10 generally represents completion or the end of a cycle, change, or a new beginning that's just around the corner. And 10s can also suggest transformation or transition. So we know immediately that we're moving from a fairly stable, structured, or perhaps stagnated position with the first card to a position of transition just by the numbers alone. So that'll be important in our interpretation. The next step, I look at the card meanings to determine if they're the same. So in this case, the card meanings are not the same. They're actually really quite different. So we would just move on because we see that there's no theme in terms of card meanings. And lastly, I'd look at the card interactions. So this is what really stands out to me in this reading. One card shows that stagnation or inaction that we see with the Four of Cups, and the second card shows movement, change, and transition. And in fact, the same theme we saw just by looking at the numbers alone and not even the nuances of the cards. So this is definitely an important aspect of the reading. So this is a common interaction that I see actually between cards in a two-card reading. Essentially, that tells me that the main situation is showing a sense of inaction or stagnation and how that needs to be improved, resolved, or impacted by card number 2, which would bring in some change, transition, and maybe acceptance of phases in life, which is the Wheel of Fortune. So I'll talk more about that shortly. So my interpretation for this reading would be the following, but let's remember the question. What aspect of my relationship do I need to focus on in order to improve the connection with my partner? So the first card describes the main situation or details surrounding the situation. So the Four of Cups shows us that this person needs to focus first on their own emotional state at this time. And that's because we see a very pensive cup card and water card in this first position. Additionally, there seems to be a level of dissatisfaction, disappointment, or kind of a lack of joy and excitement in the relationship. So the Four of Cups suggests that the person, might be withdrawing inward in order to contemplate and evaluate, but generally it's because of a feeling of discontentment, boredom, or even apathy in the relationship at this time. The Four of Cups card can also suggest getting caught up in emotions or a perspective that leads the person into a rut and creates some stagnation. So clearly the client would be feeling some lack of enthusiasm or quite possibly distant or currently disengaged within the relationship. A really important point in this reading is that the number 4 tends to desire stability, structure, and order. And if you add that to the element of water, which is really passive, this card notoriously creates a sense of inaction, where the person is not looking at that fourth cup of opportunity that's right in front of them. So you often see a lack of movement or development, along with a lack of passion and excitement when this card comes up in a relationship reading. So that tells us really the main situation. The Wheel of Fortune in the second position, as you'll recall, is about the potential outcome, result, or how it's going to impact card number 1. So the Wheel of Fortune is a fire element card. So as we noted previously, these two elements, they don't work really very well together. They're what we call unfriendly. So these two cards actually give a perfect example of why. Water wants to settle, it's more introverted, it's heavier, and it wants to find security. And fire generally wants to expand, grow, change, and inspire. So fire has to work really hard with water in order to inspire it to move out of its current position. However, the Wheel of Fortune is a very dynamic and powerful major arcana card. Majors in a reading tend to present us with important lessons in life that may be less in our control, but end up being a real catalyst for change and growth. So given the strength of this card, there is a potential for the fire element to generate energy and to make new things happen here. So the Wheel of Fortune in this reading suggests to me that this relationship is in a particular phase right now, but that it's likely to change and develop in some way. This tends to be a very positive card and often brings transition, opportunity, improvement, change, and even some good luck at times. The Wheel of Fortune is really saying, I can bring a new opportunity, so you need to just look at that new opportunity. So I think it's very possible for a new door to open here with regard to improving the relationship or connection within this relationship. However, my guidance for this client would be to focus on seeing that fourth cup as a potential new opportunity in order to create energy and enthusiasm within the relationship. So this can translate into real life by embracing change, looking for dynamic ways to kind of regenerate the relationship, essentially. It could also suggest traveling, experiencing new things together, embracing new viewpoints. And that's because this card is ruled by the planet Jupiter. So overall, it would be important for the person to move out of the current emotional state and introverted phase of contemplation in order to embrace new ideas and a different perspective. So it's always good to remember that everything is phasal in life. The wheel shows us that time and time again. So this current inactive phase is likely to shift, but the focus needs to be on open-mindedness and embracing new opportunities. And this certainly might be, a path forward to making changes within the relationship and improving the connection with their partner. So I hope this helps to see how I would interpret this reading. So I've got one more interpretation for you, but first, just a reminder to like this video and leave a comment. I would love to know if you found this video helpful. Also, don't forget to sign up for my private tarot study group on Facebook. I post various weekly exercises and activities, along with providing tarot mentorship. The link is in the description below. Okay, so let's take a look at the second two-card relationship reading. So the question for this one is, what is the biggest issue or challenge within my relationship? And the cards that are pulled are the Three of Swords in the first position, which shows the situation or details surrounding the situation. And the second card I pulled was actually the King of Swords, which I moved up because a king and queen almost always mean a person. So I find that the kings and queens rarely relate to an event, especially in a relationship reading. So my method is to move it up with the idea that it represents a person, and then I pull another card so that I still have a two-card reading plus the court card. And the third card I pulled was the Six of Cups, which shows the potential outcome, result, or how it impacts card number 1. All right, so I would start by looking at the elements within the reading. So in this reading, we have one cup card, but a predominance of sword cards. So sword and cups are actually considered neutral elements, so they don't detract or add significantly to one another. So there's some nuances there, but for the purposes of this reading, we'll consider those to be neutral elements. However, I'd like to focus on the predominance of the sword cards in the reading. So this could suggest that communication, mental thinking, analyzing, or even truth-seeking, might be important. And you also can't rule out strife or conflict when you see a lot of sword cards, because that is certainly something that they can represent in a reading. And in fact, we do see that in this reading with that Three of Swords. All right, so the next step I would look at is the numbers on the card. So the numbers are 3 and 6, which of course are not the same number. However, in my mind, I would review the meaning of those numbers just to see how it would impact the interpretation of the reading. So the number 3 typically suggests growth, development, expansion, and sometimes it can suggest, more than one person involved in a situation, such as a group, a team, or friendship circle. So that's where we actually get the idea that a third person could potentially be involved in a relationship when the Three of Swords comes up in a reading. However, you want to be very cautious in making that interpretation, and you would certainly want to see other cards that would support that. For example, the Devil card or the Seven of Swords. But in terms of the number 3, you might be wondering, well, how does the number 3 relate to the Three of Swords? Because generally it's a pretty positive number. Well, in this card, just look at those clouds above that are gathering and growing and developing. It's possible that a storm is brewing in this particular card. Certainly, we see some type of difficulty, conflict, or upset that is building or growing in the Three of Swords. All right, and then the second number is the number 6, which typically suggests harmony, balance, fairness, even like union or reconciliation and cooperation. So it's a very positive number. So where we see some challenges with the Three of Swords, we do have a number 6 that offsets that to some degree. So it could potentially help resolve some of the issues that we're seeing, which we'll get into shortly. Next step I look at is card meaning to determine if they're the same. So in this case, the card meaning is not the same. In fact, I think they're really polar opposites in terms of card meaning, which I think is very important in this reading. However, we don't see a similar card meaning here, so we would just move on to the next step. And lastly, we would look at card interaction. So this aspect of the reading really stands out to me. One card shows difficulty, strife, conflict, even separation and sadness. And whereas the Six of Cups is all about happiness, fond memories, rekindling of a connection, or restoring harmony. So this is a common interaction that I actually see in these two card readings, and essentially it tells me that the main situation in the first card is showing significant stressors or tension, and then the outcome or result of the reading in the second card shows positivity with a potential resolution of that tension or difficulty. All right, so let's interpret this reading. But first, let's just remind ourselves of the question that was asked. So it's, what is the biggest issue or challenge within my relationship? So the first card describes the main issue or details surrounding the issue. So the Three of Swords suggests there is currently some, mental anguish, upset, or conflict going on at this time within the relationship, which seems to be the biggest issue or challenge. So it feels to me like there could be significant communication issues that have escalated, maybe into quarrels or creating stress and upset. So I do think that this card certainly relates to the biggest challenge or issue the client is currently facing in her relationship. So this is something that we're going to explore in this reading. All right, so now let's take a look at the court card in this reading. You won't always get a court card in these two card readings, but when you do see it in a relationship reading, it can certainly represent the client or their partner. So occasionally it can represent a third person, but we have to be cautious with that interpretation, as I noted previously. It is one way of looking at it, but a more likely possibility is that it represents either the client or the partner of the client. So personally, when I saw these cards come up, I intuitively felt like the King of Swords represented the person's partner. Okay, so now let's take a look at the King of Swords in more detail. So in terms of characteristics, the King of Swords tends to be a more logical communicator who probably strives to be right in a conversation more often than not. That's just part of the nature of the King of Swords. There could also be a lack of sensitivity with regard to how words are spoken. So the King of Swords is an air sign, so he can seem a little more detached in his approach at times, or he might think about things quite rationally rather than emotionally. So the person's partner might think he's just speaking the truth, but in actuality the words might be quite hurtful. Certainly we do see some hurt feelings or sadness showing up in the Three of Swords for this client, which I do think is related to the King of Swords or communication issues in some way. So I came to that conclusion because the King of Swords is the same element as the Three of Swords, which is causing some difficulty in the reading. So it really amplifies that air and sword energy. All right, let's now look at the second card. So that shows up in the position of potential outcome, resolution, or how it's impacting card number 1. So the Six of Cups is a lovely card. It's a positive card that's all about emotions and connection. It also relates to happiness, joy, reunion, fond memories, and even emotional renewal. It's certainly possible that there are some very fond feelings and memories that bonded these two people in the past. So this card could be suggesting a rekindling of those feelings is really needed in the situation to help reconcile some of these issues or conflicts. So I see the Six of Cups really as a healing card that suggests that that current strife, conflict, or upset seen in the reading, has the potential to be healed in some way. Or this card can simply suggest reconciliation after an argument, which brings back that joy and happiness into the relationship. So I do see a positive potential outcome to this question, given that Six of Cups card. So I hope this is helpful in terms of how I would interpret this reading. Of course, there are other ways that you could look at the reading. There is an argument for saying that the King of Swords is someone from the past who's come into the relationship causing strife and upset. But I was following my intuition of what my gut feeling was when I saw these cards. So I would encourage you to explore other interpretations that could fit, as there's always more than one way to interpret a reading. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for more upcoming tarot interpretation videos. Take care.